off and running on a Thursday. The fact that it's Thursday is insane. I feel like no one's even taken a breath, including myself, since the regular season finale went final and the clock struck 0 on Sunday night in Pittsburgh. So everyone, why don't we just do this to start off? It has been an insane week in Baltimore and beyond, and the NFL frenzy is on. The head coach carousel is on. And for the Ravens, of course, one of many teams, including as of this morning, the Miami Dolphins, that are searching for their next head coach. Stephen Ross met with Mike this week. They discussed the season. And after that meeting and reflection, according to Adam Schefter and a number of other insiders at the national level, Dolphins owner Stephen Ross decided to move on. Why do I begin here? Well, I just think it sets the table for what is another really attractive candidate, maybe not necessarily at the head coaching position, but my gosh, him as an offensive mind, him as a genius on the offensive side of the football, widely regarded for his creativity, his scheme, his quarterback development. Sure, did not work out well with Tua when it was all said and done. There's a multitude of reasons as to why that experiment did not work with the Dolphins. And I know I, for one, would be very intrigued with Mike McDaniel as an offensive play caller in Baltimore. And so we begin. We begin there. Ian Rapport also noting from a John Harbaugh perspective, I know you guys have bigger fish to fry and your interest is elsewhere, given the significant task that Steve Bisciotti is now obviously tasked with, and that is finding John Harbaugh's successor. But the Harbaugh story and his dismissal has really set the NFL ablaze. Who knows? Miami insists on the idea that this was in no way related to John Harbaugh becoming available. But as Ian Rapport notes, with him now out there for the taking, and the Dolphins owner, Stephen Ross, is tied to the Harbaugh family, he now looms as a key candidate for Miami. A reason to fire a coach with the thought that they could potentially get Harbaugh. And here is the statement from Dolphins chairman and owner Stephen Ross. Again, kind of noting nowhere in there, obviously, is it anything related to a guy like John Harbaugh becoming available. But as Albert Breer, NFL insider, notes, it could very well be related. Obviously, they're just not going to go forth and have anything in there that would suggest that. But Albert notes, it's worth mentioning that the Dolphins put in 5 general manager requests on Monday. The one on Chargers assistant, longtime Ravens personnel guy, Chad Alexander, again, the assistant general manager to Joe Ortiz, who, of course, was the former director of player personnel in Baltimore. That request didn't go in until Tuesday, the day that John Harbaugh, of course, was, as we know, let go in Baltimore. Miami owner Stephen Ross has a lot of history with the Harbaugh family. He tried to hire Jim in 2011. It's when Jim left Stanford to take the 49ers job. And more recently, when the Ravens and John Harbaugh were in contract talks, Miami did its research/background work and lurked as an option for the coach, perhaps even in the form of a trade back then. So anyway, I know the John Harbaugh sweepstakes is not at the top of your priority list, nor should it be as a Ravens fan. I understand that. I wanted to begin there. That's the NFL breaking news as of this morning. As far as the head coach openings around the league, the Ravens find themselves in a pack with Miami, New York, meaning the Giants, Tennessee, Atlanta, Arizona, Cleveland, and Vegas. There's a ton of moving parts, and a lot of this will end up becoming relevant to the Ravens because, again, they find themselves in perhaps competition, and I'm air quoting that word, competition, with the other vacancies. Now, are they the most attractive job out there? I certainly would argue that. I think there's a lot to like about what the Giants have in place, knowing that Jackson Dart's a guy. And Atlanta, I watched them break the hearts of everybody in Tampa earlier this season on Thursday night when they came back to just somehow a fourth quarter that was ridiculous and a collapse of epic proportions, but a lot of offensive firepower in Atlanta perhaps makes that opening attractive. And there's a couple GM openings as well. So that's where we begin today. I should probably reset, let you know who I am, where my partner is. Thanks for being here today, guys. It's the 8th of January. Happy New Year to you and yours. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Primary Residential Mortgage. We'll have a quick word on ZipRecruiter coming up later on as well. And our monthly giveaway that we're doing is officially on, the $100 Fanatics giveaway. You can enter yourself in if you are interested in going after some merch from Baltimore's team store, courtesy of Fanatics and courtesy of Primary Residential Mortgage. Click on the link that we have included in the show notes. There's also one pinned in my live chat right now. Pretty easy to enter. I'll tell you more about it in just a bit. Sarah is on a pre-scheduled vacation in the tropics with one of her good friends. Wish her well. She'll be back next week. And what a week it's been in Baltimore. In 45 minutes, I'll be joined by Zach Bye, who used to host a show with former Raven Brandon Stokely, now with former NFL player Philip Lindsay for Broncos coverage. He hosts a radio show at the Fan in Denver. And the reason why I'm bringing him on is because two candidates for the head coaching vacancy in Baltimore that the Ravens have submitted interview slips to come from Sean Payton's staff in Denver. So interested to hear from his perspective. And then Matthew Coller, friend of the show, Purple Insider for the Minnesota Vikings. That's his gig and his podcast for the Vikings. You know why he's dropping by for Brian Flores analysis. Again, one of the many candidates that the Ravens have submitted an interview quest for. So a lot to get to. I've literally spent all day long, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, familiarizing myself with 7 different candidates that the Ravens reportedly are interested in speaking to, at least in an initial basis here, to begin their search for their 4th head coach in franchise history. And that's where we begin there. So why don't we dive in? Like the video if you could. Subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell. Consider becoming a channel member or gift-giving membership today. 5 of you already have. And here we go. According to Jordan Schultz, the Ravens plan on interviewing Vikings defensive coordinator Brian Flores for their open head coach vacancy. Brian has an expiring contract in Minnesota and is hopeful to get a second opportunity to be a head coach. He already was for several years in Miami. He went 24-25 as the head coach of the Dolphins. And one thing that Brian knows how to do, given that he spent over a decade under Bill Belichick in New England, first as a scouting guy, somebody that was a pro scout, a scouting assistant earlier on in his career on the operational side of Bill Belichick's program. From there, he worked in the special teams department, defensive assistant, safeties coach, linebackers coach before Miami took a chance on him as a first-year head coach from 2019 to 2021. He's a former defensive back himself as a player, a Boston College graduate, and went to high school in Brooklyn. He's 44. He'll turn 45 in February. He spent the last several years under Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota as his defensive play caller. They balled out this year, and despite not making the postseason, they were a top 5 unit, and he's known for pressure, exotic blitzes, manufacturing, you name it. Brian Flores is a wonderful, wonderful defensive mind, and I'm looking forward to talking to Matthew Coller about all of that in terms of what went right, what went wrong in Minnesota. But I know that far and away, based on what the fan base is sharing, sentiments-wise, their opinions, I'm not sure if anybody is more attractive to this fan base than Brian Flores, given his defensive prowess, given the fact that he does have previous head coach experience. With all of that said, there has been some critique out there on him And there is an active, ongoing lawsuit that he filed. I have some notes on that for you, again, from his time as the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. There is a pending lawsuit against the National Football League and several teams. This was filed back in 2022 after he had been dismissed by Stephen Ross and the Miami Dolphins. It then accused the National Football League of racism, particularly with the hiring and promotion of black coaches. Okay. There's also allegations out there that Stephen Ross paid him to lose, to tank. That is well-known reporting dating back years that led to his demise in Miami. On the flip side, his former quarterback and an analyst for Amazon, Ryan Fitzpatrick, in December of 2024, had some pretty significant pull no punches, reasonable though, level-headed analysis on his former coach that he played for in Miami, Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Has been a really hot name, and I think the further removed we get from his tenure in Miami, the more people kind of forget about how that ended, and the better his name becomes. You know, he went to Pittsburgh and got to learn under Mike Tomlin and see how he led. And now he's been in Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell. I think the interesting thing with Brian Flores, when I think about him and being able to play under him for a few years, is which version of Brian Flores are we getting? And in year one with Miami, take you back to that year. I mean, Miami got rid of every good player they had. And that was the jokingly called the tank for two a year. But I'll tell you, halfway through that year, we hadn't won a game yet. And there was a shift in the way that he was approaching his job. He was likable. He was relatable. He demanded a lot out of the players, but he was also able to get the best version of his players. And I really appreciated him for that. But as his tenure went on in Miami, he kind of became unrecognizable. A lot of the staff he brought over from New England, that was where, you know, he cut his teeth in the NFL, was there for 15 plus years as an assistant. But I think he's going to have a really hard time if you're interviewing him as a head coach. I think in the interviews, he'll be likable, he'll be relatable. But when people say, okay, give me somebody from Miami that coached under you as a reference so we can talk to them, I think he burned a lot of bridges there. I think he alienated himself from the entire staff. Instead of what you were just talking about, having the humility to ask questions, to collaborate. I think by the end of his time there, he became a dictator. He ruined a lot of those relationships that he built up through the NFL. And his ego grew so big that there wasn't any room for anyone else. And so that was why he got released at the end of his tenure in Miami. I hope, you know, we love Mike Tomlin as a leader. And I know you have some experience with Kevin O'Connell, that whole collaboration thing. I think that's, you know, McVay and the people that come up through that system, for Flores to be able to watch Kevin for a year. I hope that helps him.
Yeah.
Because he certainly needs some help in that department of, you know, not necessarily being a dictator and having a collaboration with the whole staff and having a lot of different voices and how they put together a game plan.
December of 2024, Ryan Fitzpatrick there, one player's perspective. And this was, again, from December of 2024. And Ryan, of course, is talking about, at this point, things that took place 4 years ago. I'm very aware of that. And I'm setting this up to give you both sides, including Brian's side, from a February 2022 ESPN article that reads as follows. Brian Flores has sued the NFL and three teams, Dolphins, Broncos, and Giants, alleging discrimination regarding his interview processes with Denver and New York and his firing last month by Miami. The 58-page lawsuit was filed in Manhattan Federal Court Tuesday and seeks class action status. Flores alleges that Dolphins owner Stephen Ross attempted to incentivize him to tank or purposely lose games shortly after he was hired in 2019, with Ross allegedly offering Flores $100,000 for every loss that season. Flores says that as the team won games late in the season, Dolphins GM Chris Greer told him that Ross was, quote, mad that the on-field success was compromising the team's draft position. Flores also alleges that Ross pressured him into recruiting a prominent quarterback at the end of the 2019 season, which the coach refused so as not to violate the NFL's tampering rules. Ross then allegedly invited Flores onto a yacht for lunch in the winter of 2020, where he informed him that the quarterback was, quote, conveniently arriving at the marina for an impromptu meeting. I could go on and on. It was an ugly tenure, and both sides of the story obviously need to be told. One from Ryan Fitzpatrick's perspective as his former player who played under Brian Flores, and of course from Brian's perspective that clearly he dealt with a level of just straight up, not ineptitude, but rule breaking, alleged rule breaking from his owner, ridiculous pressure, and a level of dysfunction that obviously forced him and inspired him to file a lawsuit, which is still active. And that level of when you're Steve Bisciotti, knowing that that will be a component under the baggage category, perhaps, it's not enough to not bring him in to interview him. Certainly not. And this is years ago, but that is a component that Steve Bisciotti has to take into play and into consideration. I love that he's bringing him in. Of course he's going to bring him in. Steve Bisciotti, we all know, made his billions, made his hay in hiring and staffing and recruiting. This is his expertise. And that's what's exciting about the fact that Steve Bisciotti ultimately is the guy and the only guy that can make the decision that will really set the franchise forward for the next, hopefully, decade plus. So candidate number one, Brian Flores, set to interview with the Ravens. Most of these initial interviews will be Zoom calls. And then from there, they'll materialize into, with the legitimate candidates, in-person types of experiences. Brian has a wonderful defensive resume. And certainly, you go back to his time in Miami, at the time, perhaps cracked the Lamar Jackson code, temporarily, of course, when the Ravens under Greg Roman simply did not have an answer for the cover zero blitz and the scheme and the disguise and everything that Brian dialed up successfully on that Thursday night in Miami. And of course, this year, again, despite Kevin O'Connell and the Minnesota Vikings not qualifying for the postseason, it certainly was not for a lack of what they did on the defensive side of the ball. It was more about the quarterback position, more about injuries, more about the offense. And this will be one of those shows where I'm glancing back and forth to get you guys the most up-to-date information on the Ravens happenings. This is going to be something else to watch this unfold. Candidate number one, Brian Flores. And it's important to note that if you go back, 3 years ago now, the Ravens were, of course, looking for Greg Roman's replacement, having moved on from him after the 2022 season. And it was a search that they ultimately not settled, but decided on multi-time college football champion, play caller with Georgia, Todd Monken, but not without a thorough, drawn-out, gradual process that saw 21 different interviews with 14 total candidates. They were on their time, and it'll be really interesting to see what kind of urgency, the level of urgency, if any at all, that Steve Bisciotti and his search team find themselves in, knowing that several of the candidates that we're about to talk about throughout the course of this show are actually still in the postseason, that are preparing for meaningful January postseason games at their respective organizations. Tristan says, I feel so bad for Sarah having her planned time off while the biggest changes in Ravens history happens. Recent history, that is. Nice work holding it down, Bobby, by myself. Well done, Tristan. Well played. I'm sure she's dying inside while also attempting to still be present with her friend and present in what is obviously a much-deserved vacation. And thanks for your 8 months of channel membership and commitment to the program, Tristan. Appreciate you. Ziad writes, head coach Flo, offensive coordinator McDaniel. Bobby, am I dreaming? Bashotti, where are you at? With some prayers. You might be dreaming on that one. Wildlife says 7 teams called about John Harbaugh. I bet Miami was the 7th. And that's kind of why I started with it. Not only because it was the news of the morning, but because you'd have to think that the Dolphins and their plans changed, and perhaps changed quickly when John Harbaugh became available. Adam writes, how can you call McDaniel a genius with a 500 record in 4 years? I'd rather see Kubiak hired and calling plays, along with how good Seattle looked with him calling plays. I mean, it's nothing against Clint Kubiak, and I'm not advocating for Mike McDaniel to be the head coach, just to be clear. Maybe I wasn't abundantly clear about that. I'd be advocating if something weren't to crystallize for him with several of these head coach openings around the league, there's teams lining up at the door for him to serve as their offensive play caller. Adam. Hayes says, just seen some more Zodiac stuff. Zodiac stuff? But Minter and McDaniels are all perfectly compatible with Lamar and each other. Minter at head coach / DC with McDaniel, offensive coordinator. Perfect. Everybody's lining up their staff on this Thursday. Wildlife says Flores as the head coach, McDaniels as the offensive coordinator. How about Robert Saleh as the head coach? Mike McDaniel as the offensive coordinator. Olu writes, okay, Atlanta and the Ravens are the top choices. Atlanta has a weak conference with a strong defense and strong skill players on offense. After them, it's us for reasons we already know. Harbs to Miami for sure. Although I'm with you, there's a lot to like about Atlanta. Having watched them in person again on Thursday night a few weeks ago in Tampa, watching Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson on a football field is a treat. Highly encourage you guys to go check out an Atlanta Falcons game in the coming years. Craig Zero says, why not me as head coach? Just kidding. Get me Kubiak or Mike LaFleur. Manny down in Mexico. Pete says, if Lamar doesn't like Monken, why would Brian Flores work? Ziad writes, funny, Fitz doesn't mention Ross's wrongdoings. Flo for head coach. Olu writes, I think Vance Joseph from Denver would be stronger. Denver has led the league in sacks for 2 years. Pair him with the old Miami coach as our offensive coordinator. It could be scary. Love this combination if it was possible. And for Vance Joseph analysis, which we're getting to, Zach Bai from the Denver Sports Market joins me in 30 minutes. Looking forward to that conversation. C. Brittle says, let's not forget Flores was defensive coordinator for the Steelers for 1 year, just on Mike Tomlin's staff. C. He was the senior defensive assistant and linebackers coach in 2022 for Mike Tomlin. It wasn't a good fit with Tomlin. Why do we want him here? I think it was more so, hey, he got an opportunity. He got an opportunity to get back to calling plays. That's why Kevin O'Connell brought him in. It's not that it wasn't a good fit in Pittsburgh. KP writes, Tomlin spoke glowingly about Flores after he worked for him. Correct. And I doubt Bashotti would take the word of people associated with the Dolphins over an equally well-run franchise like the Steelers. Well said. He also writes, so the knock on Flores is he burned bridges because he wouldn't compromise on his integrity? Great. Where do I sign up? Dreams writes, so Flores with McDaniel as offensive coordinator is a possibility. I think Lamar would be fine with a solid offensive coordinator. This team needs to get back to its roots. Defense wins championships. And this team has Lamar Jackson. Suntan Superman MMA writes, Clint Kubiak as head coach and Mike McDaniel as the offensive coordinator. Wildlife says, I don't buy into all the talk about Harbs losing the locker room. I'm going to have more on this coming up later on in the program. The way they played hard that last game doesn't suggest so. I think what the ultimate indication to me is that he didn't lose the locker room if that's true, and there's a he said, she said happening all around the national side of things, we're going to get to that a little bit later on after I can get through the candidates. I'm freaking almost 30 minutes in today, and I haven't even gotten to the second candidate, so apologies. But I think you guys are, hopefully you appreciate the commentary on Brian Flores because of how intriguing of a potential hire, perhaps a polarizing hire this would be. So I promise I'm getting to the other candidates, but maybe because he's the most sexy one out there, if you will, within the fan base, maybe it does warrant this kind of time devoted. But just finish that thought. I thought the way they played in Green Bay maybe was the ultimate indication that that locker room hadn't been lost, because at the time, knowing that the next day your playoff hopes essentially lied on what Cleveland would do against Pittsburgh, that to me, that shows some commitment to your head coach and commitment to the overall operation to finish the season on a strong note, which they did. Wildlife says, I don't buy into all the talk about Harbs losing the locker room the way they play. I just read that. Thank you. Contrary to popular belief, I actually did sleep close to 8 hours last night, which felt amazing. But I think because of how off kilter I've been with way less than 8 since Sunday night, I'm just still in a fog. So please excuse my English at times. Deshaun writes, y'all ate crazy for wanting Mike McDaniel. The Dolphins are the softest team because of him, not a single ounce of smash mouth football. Kobe writes, Adam reported players were crying in Harbaugh's office after he got fired, but multiple sources say he didn't get to talk to anyone. Someone is lying. Yeah, believe me, we're going to get to this a little bit later on. At the rate we're going, it probably won't be until 2 o'clock, and who knows? You guys might have 3 hours of coverage today. Somebody send Uber Eats over. Sick Nasty Nate says, Saleh is my preferred choice. Made the Jets relevant and headed a defense that gave up less than 20 touchdowns on the season. There's a lot to like about Saleh. His overall tenure did not work well for the Jets. But just ask Aaron Glenn what it's like trying to do business with Woody Johnson. M. Kaz writes, Super Bowl with a side mission of a Dolphins revenge tour featuring Flores and McDaniel as coordinators. After the ship, they can go wherever they want. You guys are hilarious. Jay Miller writes, Robert Saleh's defense is ranked in the bottom half of the league. No thanks, referring to what he did this year in San Francisco under Kyle Shanahan. Nagasaki, celebrating 5 months of channel membership, writes, I love the idea of Minter as a head coach and McDaniel as an offensive coordinator. I would kill to see Lamar in a Shanahan-like offense. I just hope whoever gets the job values the offensive line and defensive line, a.k.a. the trenches. Deshaun writes, where are you guys getting McDaniels would be a good OC? Y'all are goofy for that. What do you mean, Deshaun? Come on, brother. Do a little bit of homework on him, man. Kobe writes, I trust Flores to identify rushers in the draft, which the Ravens have not been able to consistently do under Eric DeCosta. Sick Nasty Nate says Q was right. This chat is ball illiterate. Oh, boy. Nate says, I wouldn't mind Flores. I won't judge by who is lobbying for B-Flow, but who is speaking out. All mid-arse people or organizations. But what Saleh is doing with Santa Clara Middle School, very impressive. Oh, you guys cracked me up. You really do. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Primary Residential Mortgage. And guys, the $100 Fanatics giveaway, courtesy of Primary, is officially out there for the taking this month. If you're interested in entering yourself in, comment on the post at PRMI Mid-Atlantic with the hashtag Vault. Tag 3 friends you'd buy a house with. This was just posted yesterday. Not one entry, so it's wide open for the taking. Our winner will be randomly decided and announced on January 31st. So comment on the post with the hashtag Vault. Tag 3 of your friends that you'd go in on a house with. Follow them on Instagram at PRMI Mid-Atlantic. Subscribe to the Vault on YouTube with the notifications on. Maybe you already do. And if you want to take the extra mile, scan the QR code that you see on the screen on that graphic, or copy and paste this Google form link. You can fill out information for 30 seconds, which will allow you to easily be contacted should you win when we randomly make this announcement coming up later on this month. Thanks to Primary Residential Mortgage for the continued support of our program. And if you have equity, but you don't want to give up your low rate, perhaps you might be interested in the Primary Residential Mortgage closed-end seconds. It lets you access cash for renovations, debt consolidation, or major expenses while keeping your existing mortgage, exactly as it is. Flexible use, competitive terms, and a smart solution. If you have questions, you can reach out to Primary Residential Mortgage for more today. Click on the link that we have included in the show notes. It'll bring you to primeres.com. You can also click on the link if you're watching us in real time today. That'll take you directly to the Instagram page so you can enter yourself in to this $100 Fanatics free giveaway that we're going to be doing at the end of this month. Appreciate you guys for the continued support. And Primary Residential Mortgage continues to support our program all football season long. Over 5,000 concurrents joining me on a busy Thursday where I have been trying to sink my teeth into familiarizing myself with as many candidates that the Ravens are speaking to this week as their search for their next head coach starts to ramp up. They've requested an interview as we get into candidate number 2 with Seahawks offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak. That's 5 interview requests for Gary's son. Gary, of course, was the offensive coordinator in Baltimore in 2014, just a lone year before bolting to become the next head coach of the Denver Broncos at the time. It's notable that a lot of teams are pouncing on this opportunity to work or at least chat with Clint Kubiak because he's the OC in Seattle, and Mike McDonald and company have the first overall seed in the NFC that comes with the first round bye. So everybody wants to speak with this young offensive mind. And when I say young, he's 38. He'll turn 39 next month. Played college football as a safety for Colorado State from 2005 to 2009. Began his coaching career with Texas A&M for a couple of years as the offensive quality control coach. He then took on a grad assistant gig for them. Again, this was real young. I mean, he was in his 20s. After that, went to Minnesota, where he became the offensive quality control coach. Then back to college to be the wide receivers coach, just a year in Kansas. Denver then hired him under his father to serve as an offensive assistant. He then went to Minnesota to serve as the quarterbacks coach for a couple years. Then the offensive coordinator. Then back to Denver to serve as the passing game coordinator and QB's coach in 2022. Then the Shanahan tree begins. He was hired by Kyle, by the 49ers, to serve as their passing game coordinator in 2023. Then the Saints in 2024. And Mike McDonald brought him in as the offensive coordinator in Seattle this past year. So a young, bright, Shanahan tree offensive mind, if you will, would be a first, not a retread, but a first-time opportunity. Very young, very bright. What say you guys? Brian Nemhauser covers the Seattle Seahawks. I think this is the best. I've read this a couple times now. I hope it's not becoming overly repetitive. But to me, this is the best, most level-headed pro-con list in terms of hiring Clint Kubiak, which the Ravens clearly have at least an initial level of interest in, being that they've requested to interview him. And Brian is a Seahawks blogger. And so for what it's worth, he notes that he's a good human, family man. He spent his life around not just football, but the NFL, as we just listed off. He won't be surprised by what it means to be a head coach. Even keeled, never gets too high or too low on the field or off. Players confirm he's the same guy every day. Tireless worker, puts in tons of hours, never thinks he's got it all figured out. The scheme's coming up on the second slide here. Comes with a complete system. He's unapologetic about being an outside zone team with counters off of it. Excellent at details and play action game to marry the run and the pass. Creates early down explosives while always staying committed to the run. As the Ravens have announced that Steve Bisciotti and Eric DeCosta will speak to reporters next Tuesday at 2 o'clock. Steve Bisciotti and Eric DeCosta will officially speak to reporters next Tuesday at 2 o'clock. And I got to get some fluids in me. It'll be the first time that both have spoken publicly since John Harbaugh's firing. And again, mark your calendars accordingly. At 2 o'clock next Tuesday, John Harbaugh, the aftermath of John Harbaugh, will be touched on. 2 o'clock press conference, Steve Bisciotti, Eric DeCosta, mark your calendars accordingly. We will have instant reaction on the aftermath of that. And by the way, because Sarah and I were both loud in terms of calling for Steve Bisciotti to make himself available and be transparent and showcase that vision and draw it out, and again, leave himself vulnerable in a sense to questions, I commend him for committing to it. It's the right thing to do. It's a turning point, or hopefully not a breaking point, but certainly a moment in time right now that the Ravens need their brass, their upper brass, the stakeholders, ownership, those that are going to set the scene and ultimately lead this organization into the next era of Ravens football. Everyone needs to hear from them. And so that'll be, I'm sure, informative, very fascinating to see how this ends up taking place on Tuesday. Back to Clint Kubiak. So again, comes with a complete system / scheme. He is unapologetic about being an outside zone team with counters off of it. He's excellent at details in the play action game to marry the run and the pass, creates early down explosives while always staying committed to the run. He's smart with formations, personnel, and motion, forces defenses to decide between matching heavy personnel or protecting explosives. Outsmarts himself at times, trick plays in the middle of a series where the offense is already running smoothly. Play action on short yardage when running has been successful. Not a dynamic personality. He is genuine and is who he is, but he's not a guy who is going to command a room. This is probably the biggest question mark for any team hiring him. Think Jason Garrett or his father, Gary Kubiak. And the last bullet point that he had that, quite frankly, I just ran out of bullet room for or space for, is that the staying power, being that he's literally been over the last decade a part of a slew of different organizations in a variety of roles, most of which was due to his head coach being fired. Does he have that level of development, that staying power, that track record that he can stick around for a handful of years and get better and make improvements and make adjustments accordingly? And that rounded out the Clint Kubiak analysis from someone who knows a thing or two about the Seahawks' first-year offensive coordinator. Let me make sure just to check my inbox here for a second and ensure that we're fully caught up to date. I think we are. Again, if you're just tuning in, we're talking candidates today. The Ravens have submitted requests for multiple interviews with a slew of different candidates, just as they did 3 years ago when the search for Greg Roman's successor was on at the offensive coordinator position. Candidate number 3 is Anthony Weaver. Let me fit in a couple more super chats so that we can get your guys' voice heard. Wildlife says, you've done a kick-ass job, Bobby. On another note, Q went nuclear yesterday. Kadri Ismail joined me. And let's just say in the middle of one of his train of thoughts, or maybe as I was starting to speak, he read something from Twat Swat that set him off. And it made for, hopefully, good TV. I appreciate Q for his time. Marcus Frazier writes, Ravens fans, sources already said the Ravens front office wants the next head coach to unlock and match Lamar offensively. So we're not getting a defensive coach. 4 offensive coordinator jobs should be, what is that word right there, Marcus? Skielhaas. Is that What does that mean? I don't know what that. Hold on a second. Oh, is he a doesn't he work in hold on a second here. Nathan Skielhaas. I know who you're talking about. Yeah, he's under the McVay tree. He's the pass game coordinator for the Rams. I haven't heard his name though, have you? Anyway, he goes on to say, for the offensive coordinator job, it should be Nathan Skielhaas, the pass game coordinator under Sean McVay in Los Angeles. Watch his college tape. Kubiak, meaning Clint, as the head coach. So that's what Marcus is calling for. Okay, I'm with you. Appreciate you. Is there chatter on him, Marcus? I haven't seen anything on the national level or anywhere within the local side of the Ravens' interest in him. But great, have a conversation. Anybody that's a part of the McVay tree, you kidding me? Deshaun says, if you all want another soft team that relies on trick plays, that's on you guys. Deshaun does not like Mike McDaniel. Compensatory _ prick says, Stefanski checks the most boxes, mild-mannered, knows the North, twice coach of the year with Mayfield and Flacco, good defenses, weighed down by a bad organization. He calls the offense, so accountability. Check mark. I think there's a lot to like about Kevin Stefanski. I think he did a great job in Cleveland. I just haven't seen anything of note that's concrete that the Ravens might be interested in having a conversation with him. Pete says, Bobby, does EDC become less conservative with picks? I'll believe that when I see it. There's nothing that every dollar counts. Mr. Eric DaCosta himself enjoys more than stockpiling picks. And they have plenty coming up, including the 14th overall pick. Evan, today might be the day that I crash out on you should you continue your nonsense in this live chat. Maybe today will be the day. On to candidate number 3, and it's Anthony Weaver. Anthony just finished up his second season in Miami as the defensive play caller under Mike McDaniel, who, of course, was fired earlier today if you've been living under a rock. Anthony has perspective and experience in Baltimore as both a player and a coach. Perhaps his player perspective and player background was on full display when he had this to say at a recent press conference for the Dolphins.
I may sit up here, I'm a nice guy, I smile, I do all those things, but all of our problems that we need to solve can be solved through violence. Yeah, they want to legislate it out of the game, but we play defensive football. And in defensive football, at some point, you draw a line in the sand and you say, I'm going to set the edge. I'm going to stick my helmet under this guy's chin, and I'm going to set the edge. I'm going to violently take the ball away. And that's what we need to do. With a steely-eyed focus, with resolve, with resiliency, and we're going to stop people. And I'm determined, we're all determined for that to happen.
Anybody determined to get him back in the building after listening to that? What about his thoughts on Lamar Jackson, if that wasn't enough for you?
We've had some unique views of Lamar Jackson. You played against him his first MVP season. You were on staff with him. I'm curious, how has he grown as a passer, but then also with the addition of Derrick Henry, just how has that improved him as a runner?
Yeah, he's such a special talent, right? And I think his skill set now paired with what Todd Monken has brought from just a schematic standpoint, it's the perfect mesh, right? Because it allows him to utilize all his strengths. He can have a little bit more control of the huddle, kind of check in and out of some concepts. And then obviously, like he can pull the ball down and run at any particular point, whether it's designed or not. So I think the partnership and marriage between him and Monk has been successful, and you've seen the results of all that.
October of 2025, prior to the Dolphins and Ravens playing on Thursday Night Football. So Anthony Weaver, 2 clips just to kind of get you started. Remind you, if you needed a reminder, that Anthony Weaver is a candidate. The Ravens have requested to interview him, and he has a lot of friends, a lot of great relationships in that building. And as Jeff Darlington notes, he's got some options out there on the table as well. Arizona will take a look at him on Friday, tomorrow. Atlanta's going to interview him on Saturday, and Baltimore will be Monday. And so knowing that the Ravens have, so this is pretty much, this to me feels like this is a safe bet. One, they have an interview that we know is scheduled as far out as Monday with Anthony Weaver. Two, several of the candidates that we now know that I'm trying to get through, and I know I'm almost 50 minutes in and only 3 candidates in, so I'm sorry about that, but I'm trying to do due diligence and justice to every single candidate. And we'll be joined by Zach By here in a little bit for the Denver side of things, so be prepared for the Broncos analysis that's coming on Vance Joseph and Davis Webb. Oh, shoot, now I forgot my bullet points. Anyway, one, they have an interview scheduled as far out as Monday. Two, several of the candidates are still in the postseason. Three, back in 2023, when they were trying to find their Todd Monken, they talked to 14 different candidates, 21 different interviews. So as you start to put the tea leaves together here, I don't think there's an urgency, no question, but I don't think they feel rushed. There's a difference between the two. Urgency clearly is being had. They've already got at least 7 candidates that they're speaking to or are going to speak to. Rushed would be to make a decision immediately. Digging more into Anthony the person, Anthony the football guy. He'll turn 46 this summer. He's 45 years old. He's a former defensive end himself, and a pretty darn good one. 2nd-round pick back in 2002 by the Ravens. They have a great familiarity with him. That was in the Brian Billick era, of course. Played his college football at Notre Dame and had a relatively short NFL career. Was in Baltimore from 2002 to 2005, Houston from 2006 to 2008, and then his coaching career began as a grad assistant for the Florida Gators. After that, he became the linebackers coach at North Texas. Then to the NFL, the Jets hired him as an assistant D-line coach in 2012. Then primarily he's been a defensive line coach. Was for Buffalo, was for New York, was for Cleveland, was for Houston, was for the Ravens. And then, of course, the Dolphins gave him the opportunity to be their defensive coordinator under Mike McDaniel the last couple years. So that's sort of the background that comes with Anthony. Jeff Zrebiec spoke the other night on how they feel like, or this was in his piece, on The Athletic. You should go check it out. That the Ravens feel like he was better suited. Remember, they passed on him. They passed on him multiple times to serve as their potential defensive coordinator. They felt like there's people in the building that felt like he would be a better head coach. And he's very charismatic. As you can see, he also has a level of intensity to him, that clip that you just heard. And so the Ravens will interview former Raven, both as an assistant and as a player, Anthony Weaver, coming up next week. Did they make the wrong hire a couple years ago when they decided on Zach Orr? That's neither here nor there, but perhaps there's a debate to be had along those lines. Anthony Weaver then left for Miami. Denard Wilson left for Tennessee. Mike McDonald left for Seattle. And perhaps by process of elimination, and I shouldn't do him, it's no disrespect, but because of the way the last 2 years have gone defensively, I think it's a fair question to be had. Look, everybody raves about Zach. And he's still extremely young, and I hope he gets another opportunity in this league. And sometimes, as Terrell Suggs would say, you only are as good as your personnel. No pass rush. Secondary struggled. Roquan Smith's taken a step back. His running mate has been a revolving door. They've leaned on a rookie. I thought Teddy was great until he tore his ACL. There's reasons for it, and Zach's shouldn't be the only scapegoat in terms of truly evaluating what went wrong defensively. Starts at the top when it comes to personnel, and then, of course, leaks down. Player execution, inexperienced play calling, you name it. It was a perfect storm. And ultimately, one of the reasons why the Ravens are on the outside looking in as a non-contender this year. Some super chats have come in. And Femi's in the chat. What's up, Fem? I know Femi is still very high on ZO. Nate says, what are the odds it comes out of left field? I didn't have Harbs on my bingo card in 2008. If John Fox was 25 years younger, he would be my pick. Yeah, seriously, right? Like, what are the odds that all these candidates to start the process are a total smokescreen and Steve Bisciotti's doing his business and already has his hand-picked selection like years ago? That would be very Steve. Richard says, I don't like Fitz. I don't like how Fitz doesn't mention the scandal. I think he did in the segment. I just snipped what was the perfect amount of time for our show. It was a full segment. It can be found on the Fitz and Wit show. That's their podcast. Appreciate you, Richard. And Dark Thunder says Anthony Weaver could be our D'Amico Ryans. Pretty big age difference there, though, I believe. Right? What's D'Amico? Pretty sure he's significantly younger. Only a few years. 41. God, he seems young, though, doesn't he? Heck of a job. Ooh, boy, that Houston defense. Good luck, Pittsburgh. Well, we're an hour in. Should we get to candidate number 4? Jesus. Oh, my gosh. Zach By from a Denver perspective joins me in 3 minutes. And so why don't I do this? I was going to go to Davis Webb and Vance Joseph, who the Ravens are set to interview. But because Zach will be coming on and he knows that level of Broncos country more than I do, why don't we just kind of fill in the pieces here and finish up other candidates that maybe aren't garnering as much traction, like a Matt Nagy. The Ravens are reportedly set to interview him on Sunday. Matt would qualify as one of those retreads, being that he has had an opportunity to be a head coach before. It was not successful in Chicago from 2018 to 2021. But he does have a regular season head coaching record of 34-31, 0-2 in the postseason. So he's above 500 as a head coach and has a ton of experience, both as a player, used to be a quarterback. He was undrafted in 2001, went on to play in a bunch of different leagues outside of the National Football League. And as a coach, it began all the way back in 2001 as a quarterback's coach for a high school team in Pennsylvania, and then became an Eagles coaching intern, rose up through the ranks of Philadelphia, then became the quarterback's coach in Kansas City, then the offensive coordinator in Kansas City. This is in the 2016, 2017 years. Chicago brought him in as the head coach for the Bears, 2018 to 21. And then Andy Reid said, hey, come on back with us, where he served as a senior assistant and quarterback's coach in 2022. And then as offensive coordinator the last 3 seasons. And look, I hate to just simply say, look, like to me, like this is not the best analysis out there, but look at what this Chiefs offense has become over the last several years since Matt showed up. That they've literally plummeted and regressed. You can talk about injuries all you want, but it might be as simple as that. Patrick Mahomes has had pedestrian-like seasons, or at least a pedestrian-like year, and they failed to make the postseason for the first time in over a decade. So while it's not as simple as just pointing the finger at their offensive play caller, it does happen under his watch. And that's where the Chiefs find themselves right now. So again, Ravens doing their due diligence. He's got previous head coach experience in Chicago. And the Ravens are going to bring him in on Sunday to be interviewed. That was candidate number what? I've lost track. But let's get to the Denver side of things. Because my friend and Mr. Personality himself in the Denver area co-hosts The Drive with Philip Lindsay, former NFL player. And, of course, used to do great work with Brandon Stokely, former Raven, Super Bowl champ. That's Zach Bye, bringing him in momentarily to set the scene here. Vance Joseph is going to interview virtually for the Ravens. He's got a slew of other opportunities and why wouldn't he? Because this is a Broncos defense that has been exceptional under him. Sean Payton brought him to Denver with him several years ago. And now, of course, they will play for an AFC championship opportunity with Bo Nix, playing some good football under Sean Payton. And somebody that's had a front row seat to all of that is my guy, Albany's finest. Grew up with him. Think the world of him. Zach Bye. Great to see you, brother. Happy New Year, dude. What's going on?
Happy New Year, Bobby. Good to see your face, my man.
Absolutely. Thank you for carving out some time. I know you got a ton going on today. You're gearing up for a postseason run, gearing up for a wild card weekend, everything that's coming up. But why don't we start with Vance Joseph and Davis Webb? The Ravens at least have initial interest in bringing them in to talk about what something might look like in this post-John Harbaugh era. So beginning with Vance, being that he's the more senior of the two, what has he done in Denver since Sean brought him in a few years ago?
Well, just his story, Bobby, is crazy because how many times is someone the head coach of an NFL team, get fired, and then come back as a coordinator in pretty short order? It was just a couple years in between the head coaching experience and the defensive coordinator experience. It got off to a really rough start. You remember the one Sunday where the Broncos gave up 70 points to the Miami Dolphins in 2022? People wanted him fired. In fact, I have heard whispers that Sean Payton wanted to fire Vance Joseph after 4 to 5 games in his first game back as defensive coordinator. And I have been told that the new Broncos ownership group were the ones that told Sean Payton that we're not firing someone 5 games into a season. They had just fired Nathaniel Hackett after 1 year the previous season. And so Sean had to be patient, and he was rewarded greatly with that patience. Because once Vance Joseph settled in, because the year before Vance got to Denver, the defensive coordinator was named Ejiro Evero, who's the defensive coordinator for the Carolina Panthers right now. And they had a good defense. And Vance, at the start of his first season, said, you want to know what? I'm not going to come in and change everything. This is a good defense. I'm going to keep the same language that Evero had, and I'm going to sort of adapt to the defense. And at a certain point in that first year, he said, I have to make this my own. I'm trying to walk in someone else's shoes. I need to go back to my identity. And once he did that, the Broncos defense kind of went to the moon. They've been basically, a top 3 defense for 2.5 years. The back half of his first season, certainly last year, leading the NFL in sacks. This year again, leading the NFL in sacks. I mean, 63 sacks in a season is just insane, considering that the NFL record all time is 72. So to lead the league in that very important category, getting after the quarterback in 2 consecutive years, is important. Now he's got some great weapons at his disposal. He really does. Some all-pro caliber, defensive player of the year caliber players. But VJ's fingerprints are all over this thing. And in addition to just who he is as a play caller, he's got a way about him that landed him the Broncos head coaching job in the first place. And it will not surprise me at all if he knocks this interview process out of the park. Now, that's no guarantee that you're going to get the job, but he's already done this before. He's actually done this several times. He was interviewing for head coaching jobs this time last year. So this is going to be his 3rd go-round going for a head coaching job. So he's going to be well-versed in the process and has the resume to be in those interviews.
53, turns 54 in September. And that first stint that you mentioned in Denver as the head coach was 2017 to 2018. If I'm remembering correctly, was that right around the time that you ended up bopping out there to start your career in Denver?
Yeah, you're on it. My first year here was Vance Joseph's first year as the head coach, and I'll never forget it. I was in his first press conference, and I'm standing right next to the podium, and his hands were trembling. I mean, they were trembling. And to watch him evolve from that moment where he is visibly shaking to where now he's just cool as a cucumber in this interview process. No big deal. I've done this before. I mean, he's going to have 5 interviews. 5 interviews. You know what I mean? He's doing 2 in one day tomorrow. So VJ's come a long way.
All right, cool. So that's good stuff on him. Then on the flip side, I mean, again, he's 53. Somebody that's a year younger than me is Davis Webb, who's garnering a little bit of traction here. He is 30 years old. He'll turn 31 on the 22nd of this month. He's a former quarterback himself. And as Schrager notes here, the Cliff Kingsbury tree is very much alive. He played under him at Texas Tech in the air raid, had an entire NFL career, has been at Sean Payton's hip the last 3 seasons, as Peter notes. Despite the age, he's lived a football life. He's well known from football fans. What has his tenure in Denver been like so far from your vantage point?
Man, what a fast riser. Davis Webb. He played his last game in the league just like a couple of years ago. And I say played, he didn't play a lot. He was, backup quarterback. I actually only think he started 1 game in his NFL career. I want to say, don't quote me on that, but I want to say that's the case. But anyway, he transitioned from being a backup quarterback right into coaching. And think about this. He comes in interviews with Sean Payton, right? Sean Payton's been around the block, okay? He interviews with Sean Payton to be a quarterback's coach. He crushes the interview. He leaves the facility, and Sean Payton says, I think we just made a major mistake by letting him leave. He's going to go interview somewhere else, and he's going to get the job. We should have just offered him the job right now. That was a mistake. Get him on the phone. Get him back to the facility. He does a U-turn, comes back to the facility. They offer him the job. And his partnership with Sean Payton has been tremendous, but it's not as unique as the partnership that he's had with Bo Nix. Bobby, it has been so interesting to watch the mind meld with Bo and seeing their partnership on full display. This is someone, I mean, they were down in the 4th quarter against the New York Giants, and there's 90 seconds left in the game. And Davis Webb says something to Bo Nix with a big smile on his face that makes Bo Nix break out in laughter with 90 seconds left in the game and you're down, right? He's got this unique way about him. He's very the uniqueness about Webb is, and the word is that he blends experience on the field at the highest level collegiately, experience in a quarterback room at the highest level in the NFL, but also he's got this analytical side of him that everyone keeps talking about, that for a coach that has dove as deep into quarterback specific analytics, from what I'm told, there's just not a lot of coaches right now that are as deep into quarterback specific analytics. So I think that there is some value as we continue to go further down the road into the analytical age of like, well, what makes Davis Webb so unique? I think people are trying to figure it out. Here's what I'll tell you, though, from a human standpoint. There was another moment in a game where Bo Nix flipped a play from the right side of the field to the left side of the field. This is his rookie season, okay? So not this year, last year. He flipped the play at the line of scrimmage. It ends up being a wide open touchdown to Troy Franklin, who was a rookie out of Oregon, but he dropped it. He dropped it in the end zone. He comes off the field. Bo Nix comes off the field, and Sean Payton screamed in Bo's face. Bo Nix screamed back. And who stepped in and was a second voice screaming in the face of Sean Payton? This was really unique. Davis Webb stepped in front, Davis Webb. I thought I said Davis Mills again. Davis Webb stepped in front of Bo Nix in this moment of tension between Bo and Sean. Webb steps in front of Nix and gets in Sean's face. This was his first year as a quarterback's coach. He stepped up and defended the quarterback as a quarterback coach against the very guy that hired him. it was such a unique moment. I'm just not used to seeing a sequence like that on an NFL sideline where a first time a quarterback's coach is stepping up on behalf of the rookie quarterback in the face of the head coach. It was one of these moments that made the Broncos fan base like, whoa, that was really unique. What that was different. And he kind of had Bo's back in that moment. And from what I understand, in that moment, Davis Webb's respect among the players in the locker room like went to the moon that he stepped up to the head coach in that moment. So those are just a couple stories and anecdotes about Davis Webb. He is considered a very bright mind. Russell Wilson has talked on the record about his 1 year with Davis Webb and just how his intellect sort of popped out to him. And he was like, yeah, that's a future offensive coordinator. That's a future head coach. So, yeah, I mean, he's one of these, I'm not going to say golden boy, but he's one of these fast risers. It would not shock me. Look, I just got to say this. I don't think he's getting a job. I don't think you can jump over being an offensive play caller. But I think going through the process, there's real value here. And I think that, like a lot of guys, he's going to do this process again next year. Maybe say Vance Joseph gets a head coaching job with the Raiders, okay? If he doesn't get it in Baltimore. He's the second most likely after Brian Flores by the odds. There are rumors out there that if Vance Joseph gets a head coaching job, he's bringing Davis Webb as his offensive coordinator. And so if this ascension keeps happening, it wouldn't surprise me if Davis Webb is more authentically getting these head coaching interviews in 2 to 3 years with the intent of like, hey, we need to beat another organization to this punch with this guy, the same way that Sean Payton said, we need to get this guy to do a U-turn and get back to the facility because someone else is going to hire this bright mind.
Yeah, this happens every year, right? And from a Ravens perspective, they got guys that are scheduled to interview as far out as Monday. And as you guys know, in Denver right now, gearing up for a bye week and just chilling and sitting back and watching Wild Card Weekend, like as you can see on the screen here, there's a reason why Vance has a line at the door for him, because this is the time where you can have these conversations, at least in an initial level. And that's what the Ravens are doing. Let me get you out of here on this because I'm interested in your perspective. The John Harbaugh dismissal has rocked the NFL. It's set this place ablaze. Mike McDaniel's fired this morning in Miami. The Dolphins insist, all the reporters that are being fed, you name it, insist that it was not related. Let's be honest. It may not have been related when it's all said and done. But if you don't think that seventh team that was calling John Harbaugh's agent the other night was Stephen Ross and the Miami Dolphins, I don't know what to tell you. But I'm curious, your outsider perspective in Denver, in that market, what has the conversation been about, knowing that Sean Payton is there to stay? John Harbaugh, it doesn't become available overnight. He is. What are your thoughts on it?
Man, first of all, I have so many thoughts on this. One, don't forget, because you just mentioned, you said, hey, if you don't think the Dolphins were like secretively that team, like that call, don't forget, remember they had that secret meeting with Brady. Yes. That was off the record on a yacht. So they've already shown a propensity to wade into those waters. I was on the air when it happened, and I couldn't believe it. Bobby, me and my co-host Philip Lindsay, we were having a discussion in the moment about John Harbaugh. And I said, man, there's a thought out there that maybe one of these two, Lamar or John Harbaugh, may not return next year. They're saying all the right things into microphones, but there's like this undercurrent, right? Like when I talk to I'm not going to say their names, but we talk with a couple NFL insiders every week, okay, on the air, and they're like paid guests to come on the air. And they'll sort of tiptoe around like the verbiage of what they want to say. And then I'll get off the air with them, or I'll see them at practice or what have you. And they'll give me the more real. And they're like, yeah, I think that things are not right there in Baltimore. You know, that things are just off. And I can't go on the record with it because I don't, but I'm just telling you the general feel in the building is off. And so, but look, John Harbaugh's a great coach. You know, we've had discussions since then, since the firing. Well, we just had many, many layered discussions. I think he's a great coach. I'm a huge fan of him. He's the golden goose right now in this cycle. And I just wonder, and I'm sure your brain, if not conversations have led here, you know, would would it be rewarding for John Harbaugh to just show some patience? What if Buffalo gets upset here? Well, I say upset. If they get beat by Jacksonville and they lose in the wild card and they're regressing, I mean, goodness gracious, you might have to think about that. And I think I hold John Harbaugh in higher esteem than I do someone like Sean McDermott. And I'm a Buffalo Bills fan at heart. And so, and we've had these discussions. Man, we've been talking about Andy Reid retiring now for a couple of years. Who is going to carry the mantle for the second half of Pat Mahomes' prime? I mean, you got to think about that if you're John Harbaugh. I just would not look. A few years ago, and this wasn't reported, I put it out there on the air in Denver. I knew that the Broncos ownership group at the 11th hour went to Ann Arbor and tried to convince Jim Harbaugh to become their coach. And Harbaugh was going back and forth. And he decided to return to Michigan and be patient with the NFL for one more year. And he ended up winning the national championship that year at Michigan. But by him just being patient for another year, you now get to coach Justin Herbert for his prime and just be a little bit more selective. And if I were John Harbaugh, I look at some of these organizations right now. The Cardinals, owned by the Bidwells, bad organization. Miami with the Rosses, historically bad organization. You look at you can go through how many Ravens are a great organization. Somewhere like Cincinnati's not. Buffalo historically is not. Cleveland is not. Arizona is not. So I would just be choosy with the organization, if I'm John Harbaugh. And I wouldn't be rushing into anything. You look at Sean Payton, he ends his relationship with the Saints. He took a year off and just said, let me do inventory of the league. And by doing that, he joins an organization like Denver, which is historically a great organization. So I would just, again, I could talk about this with you for an hour, but I would just, if I were him, I would be extremely patient. You are an incredible commodity in that world. One of the 5 to 7 best coaches at the NFL level walking planet Earth. Don't rush into a situation, even if it's like a situation like Miami. You don't have a quarterback right now. You're not sitting with some number 1 overall pick. You're historically, not a well-run organization at the very top. So, yeah, I'm fascinated by it, man. I'm absolutely fascinated. We've even had just fantasy football conversations of hey, if you could wave a wand, would you trade out Sean Payton for John Harbaugh? And ultimately our answer was no. But those are the kind of conversations that we've been having here in Denver.
It is beyond fascinating, and he's going to take his time. There's reports out there that he's going to take his daughter Allison back to law school after holiday break in South Florida. And so the sweepstakes will have to wait until next week. There's going to be plenty going on. I got your Twitter up on the screen. Like we've mentioned a couple times here, you are the co-host of The Drive, the host of The Drive with former NFL player, former Colorado Buffalo, Philip Lindsay. That's Denver Sports 104.3 The Fan. Say hello to my sister Tori and her fiance for me. They're living in Golden these days. You and I got to catch up once the season's over. Best of luck to the Broncos, and it's always good being with you, brother. I miss you.
Yeah, I miss you too, man. Cheers. Much success. Happy New Year, and thanks for having me on.
Zach, bye, everybody. On his way out. Appreciate you, brother, as always. And waiting in the waiting room, and I'm a little bit behind, so sorry about that, Matt. Let's get Matthew Coller in here in just a second, host of the Purple Insider. We're just learning everything we can and sinking our teeth into the many candidates that the Ravens at least have initial interest in as the process for their 4th head coach. And the search is on in Baltimore. Over 5,600 concurrents with me on a busy Thursday. If you guys could please like the video on your way in, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, hit that notification bell, consider becoming a channel member or gift-giving membership, and let's reset. The Ravens have interest in Brian Flores, defensive play caller for the Minnesota Vikings. He spent the last several years there under Kevin O'Connell. A lot of success this year. Friend of the show is back, Matthew Coller, again, Purple Insider. We had you on earlier this year, and maybe we thought then what we know now. And the Ravens have some interest, as do many teams, in Brian Flores. What's up, brother? Great to see you.
Man, Doesn't it feel like it's crazier for us right now than it is for the people who are covering playoff games? I mean, they're just continuing to cover games. We got all the madness going on. The Brian Flores situation is really fascinating. I mean, on so many different levels. This isn't just a defensive coordinator who had a lot of success and is now considered a coaching candidate. This is someone who is suing the National Football League, a lawsuit that just had another update going, elements of this being taken to the Supreme Court. So this isn't a small deal between Brian Flores and the National Football League. And he seemed like after the lawsuit was filed that it was realistic he might never coach again. The Pittsburgh Steelers give him a chance, put him on their coaching staff. He ends up coming to Minnesota after they fired Ed Donatel, looking for a more aggressive approach. And it's really been here where he has separated himself to the premier defensive coordinator in the National Football League. When he took over this defense, they were the worst. Like, think about Dallas this year, think about Cincinnati. That's what the Vikings defense looked like when Brian Flores got here. Now, no one wants to face the Minnesota Vikings defense and Brian Flores. You saw at the end of the year, they eliminated the Detroit Lions from the playoffs in a game where they couldn't block any of the things that he was throwing at them. He's built it really in his vision with a scouting background of bringing in the players that he wanted. And yet you think, okay, that should be pretty much everything, right? He doesn't sign a contract extension with the Vikings, meaning that he is a free agent for a coordinator of this caliber, which is something that's unheard of. So there's a lot to this, man.
There really is. And I think we need to start with, like, what's a given is what you've discussed and what we've watched unfold. He's a tremendous X's and O's minds. His track record speaks for itself. The guy blitzes when he's asleep. I mean, the guy is a manufacturer of pressure. His defenses always have a level of DNA that is violent and consistent and you name it. We know all that. But speaking to his candidacy, which is why I wanted to have you on, it's a sensitive one. It's a polarizing discussion. It's just how it is. Whenever racism is involved in being alleged and everything that took place with the allegations from his time in Miami, that is where the conversation begins in terms of candidacy. This is not a play caller that's trying to be hot. Well, who knows? Maybe he'll end up being a play caller elsewhere. With Miami's going to be open and whatnot. But this is a head coach. This is the face of the franchise. So let me just ask you point blank. How much do you think up until this point the legal trouble has affected his candidacy?
I think it's a factor. I don't know that it's the only factor, though. I mean, it really depends because we have seen the owners, let's call it galvanized, so we don't accuse them of anything they can sue us for, against certain people in the National Football League before, including Colin Kaepernick. We know that this is an old boys club, and if they don't want somebody somewhere and they're all together in that, then it will not happen. So I think that the performance of Brian Flores in 2023 and in 2024 were certainly enough for him to warrant at least conversations. And there were not many. There were a couple along the way, but there were not many conversations he had as a head coach. But now you've almost reached kind of a critical mass with that, because when you look around, all right, John Harbaugh is the belle of the ball, but then who else? Kevin Stefanski, Mike McDaniel just got fired. All right, like those are good candidates for jobs, but there's not a great, amazing pool of potential head coaches. Brian Flores' track record, by the way, won a lot of games in Miami despite all of the drama there, and then coming to Minnesota, completely turning around the defense. And I think this was maybe his best performance as a defensive mind, considering he got no assistance whatsoever from the offense. And the reason they are 9-8 is because of two people. Brian Flores won, and their kicker, Will Reichard. That is why they were 9-8. They did not have anywhere the offensive performance to be at that point. So he elevated them to finishing with a winning record. So that even more has been in the spotlight of, wow, like this team found a way to, they missed the playoffs, but get above 500 just because of this guy and the defense that he built. So I think there's factors that are coming together. A lot more people, you see analysts talking about him. Last year, it was Kevin O'Connell who really owned the spotlight because of what Sam Darnold did. And it was like, oh yeah, they've got a really good defense as well. Good job, Brian Flores. But this year, it was so much of, without this guy, you are a 5 or 6 win football team at absolute best. And so I think those factors are kind of merging. But the question is always, will someone break rank with the rest of the ownership out of desperation to find the best possible head coach? And you do get to the point where the guy has shown so much. It's not just good at his job, it's innovative at his job. It's pushing forward the needle of how defense is played around the National Football League. This can all be tied back to Brian Flores, the complicated looks, the deceptive coverages, the pressures that we see. You're seeing teams all around the NFL do the stuff that Brian Flores was doing 2 years ago in 2023, and now you see it in every single game. So this is beyond just, hey, yeah, he's had a lot of success and he's pretty good. This is a next level type of caliber of mind on the defensive side, but it's not just the lawsuit that could potentially be holding him back. It's also that Tua called him a bad person on a podcast. That's not the look that you're really going for when it comes to the connection with the most important guy in the franchise, QB1. And then Ryan Fitzpatrick, his words carry a lot of weight. He's got a lot of respect in the league. And Ryan Fitzpatrick has called him and used the word dictator to describe how he managed in Miami. Now we can get into more about that if you like, but there's a lot of converging factors here of a brilliant mind, but baggage that comes along with it.
Yeah, that's exactly, it was the perfect segue because the comments from December of 2024 have recirculated. I've shared it back-to-back days just as part of the conversation. And of course, the live chat's going to react accordingly because speaking of soft, that's what they are in some cases when it comes to there are some people have their minds made up on Brian Flores, you know, that this is the guy. And then there shouldn't be any conversation or context added in terms of the pros and cons, which clearly there's enough pros to bring him in. Steve wants to have a conversation with him on an initial level, and he should. This is going back years ago, right? This is going back several years ago. And to what you just illustrated, perfectly articulated, he single-handedly turned around that Minnesota Vikings defense, and that should be talked about, and the tendencies and the abilities and what he's done successfully there should be celebrated. But if you're an owner, ultimately you got to and Steve Bisciotti made, I don't know if you know this, but he made his money. He made his due, his hay as a hiring manager, as a staffer, as a recruiter. This is his expertise, reading into people, getting to know them, looking at it from that viewpoint. And so I got to wonder, being that yes, this was what's recirculated this week was a snippet from December of 2024, Ryan and Witt, their podcast, as you know. But so not only was it a year ago, but what he talks about during his tenure under Brian Flores was what? 4 years ago at this point-ish? 3 or 4 years ago? So if you could expand on those comments and perhaps just how much weight they attach to them from an influential standpoint, given the decision that somebody's going to have to come down to make when it comes to Brian and his candidacy coming up this hiring cycle.
Yeah, this is like every can of worms has another little can of worms inside of it with Brian Flores. And this is certainly part of it because Brian Flores took over a team that was tanking. And according to Flores, if you really dive deep into this, he was offered, this is his claim, he was offered extra bonuses for losing football games, which if you've ever met Brian Flores, I cannot imagine how that conversation went. Like asking this guy to lose games to try to get them to the top. And then ironically, they get Tua anyway, but the tank for Tua thing. So that relationship in Miami certainly did not start off on the right foot with Tua because the whole tanking thing was for him. The other part of it too is that head coaches want to win football games, which doesn't always connect to playing young quarterbacks and developing young quarterbacks. So there was conflict about when to play Tua, when to keep Ryan Fitzpatrick in. And I think as things started to devolve and get more challenging from the way that Ryan Fitzpatrick describes it, that's where Brian Flores said, I'm taking the reins of all of this. I'm not going to be a delegator. We're going to do whatever I say. And Fitzpatrick said that you'd be hard pressed to find other coaches on that staff that would back Brian Flores as a head coach again. Now, your point, though, is right, that we are talking about something that happened multiple years ago in his first opportunity as a head coach, going from a linebackers coach to the head of an entire organization that was extremely dysfunctional. So, there's an old Chappelle skit about, the real world and how people go crazy. And if people know that, they know what I'm talking about. But it's kind of like you put a guy in a situation that would drive anyone insane. And, it doesn't work out maybe perfectly. Even the best franchises, as you've seen, Baltimore has been held up forever as the cream of the crop. And yet still dysfunction is possible inside any NFL building. But he goes to the Pittsburgh Steelers. He works with Mike Tomlin. He comes to the Minnesota Vikings and works with Kevin O'Connell. And I think that if you were ranking all of your culture coaches in the National Football League, 1 through 32, 1 and 2 are probably Mike Tomlin and Kevin O'Connell. And I think that Brian Flores has been very reflective about this anytime he's ever been talked about it, because when Tua called him a bad person, first of all, at that press conference where Flores was set to talk about it, his players came to the podium with him before that press conference to back him. So that was something they didn't have to do, but they wanted to make it clear, like, we don't feel the way that Tua is describing. And I have never heard that from his players here. In fact, if you go look at the best players to ever talk about something are guys with nothing to lose. If you go look at Stephon Gilmore or Anthony Barr, the things that they've posted on social media about Flores' candidacy, they are backing him 100%. And those guys are not in the league anymore. They could say whatever they want. And so anything internally, whether it's Josh Metellus or Harrison Smith saying that one of the main reasons he returned was that he loved working with Brian Flores. So people can learn, people can change, especially in the NFL, and understand maybe better how to delegate, how to run an organization. But you can't ignore that stuff happened. And you also can't ignore that he didn't sign an extension with the Vikings, and wonder about what are the internal relationships like with him and the front office and Kevin O'Connell when he decided not to do that. Like, it couldn't have just been money as the cause. So there is, and what makes him such a fascinating character in the NFL in general is there's a lot that we just don't know that has gone on. And there's a lot that we can't project about how he will handle that situation again. All I could tell you is that the players here have backed Brian Flores 100% really from day one and connected with him extremely well. And I also know that regardless of how dysfunctional it was, he had elite defenses in Miami too. And the guy really knows what he's doing on that side of the football.
It's an extraordinary perspective. Thank you for detailing that. I mean, whoever makes this call on him, assuming that he's going to get another opportunity this hiring cycle at the head coach position, which is an assumption, we'll have to see how it all plays out. But whoever, if that assumption comes true and comes to fruition, an owner will ultimately be betting on and understanding that Miami tenure, that 3-year, that tenure right there was more of a product of the dysfunction, the ownership pressure, right? The player dynamic, and ultimately betting on that's not him, that's in the past. And the last several years have been more a function of working under, to your point, the ultimate culture setter in Mike Tomlin, getting a chance to turn around a Minnesota Vikings defense that obviously was among the league's worst, and doing so quickly, almost overnight, and working under another a lot younger than Mike Tomlin, but another culture setter, right? And that is the new, if you will, or the here and now Brian Flores that you'd be signing up for to lead your organization. In real time here, just for my audience right now, before we get you on out of here, Matthew, that the Ravens have confirmed that they've made their first interview complete. It's Broncos defensive coordinator Vance Joseph. We just spoke to Zach Bye about that right before Matthew came on. So one of a bunch 3 years ago is what we're kind of going off of as a sample size here, Matthew, when they were looking for the Greg Roman successor. And they ultimately go with Todd Monken from Georgia, and he was fantastic for the most part, including 2 caliber MVP seasons for Lamar. That year, that offseason, they conducted 21 different interviews with 14 candidates. So we're all kind of buckling up. There's nothing urgent, I don't think, right now, or let's say rushed. They're urgently working. They're not rushed. And that's where we kind of finish up here. So for the record, brother, would you, as an NFL owner, give Brian another chance at the head coach position?
I think for the Baltimore Ravens specifically, and I'll tell you why I like this idea. For the Ravens specifically, I would. Number one is that they have not had the defense that they had during some of their best and most dominant seasons. And he is not only just a great schematic mind, but also his roots are in scouting. And he has really brought that to fruition in Minnesota with his ability to identify talent, put players together, go out into free agency, bring in an Andrew Van Ginkel, who, I think the world didn't even know who that was, and now is a superstar in the NFL. We've seen, players develop like Josh Metellus, Jalen Redmond, who, again, no one ever heard of, that are now key players that are getting extensions and things like that. I think that's a big deal for Baltimore. The other thing is, too, you mentioned urgency. I think when you're looking for urgency with your quarterback situation to win right this second, that taking the risk that Brian Flores' culture would ultimately maybe devolve at some point might be worth it. Now, again, I think that he can grow. I think he's learned a lot from all those things about how to manage. But even if that is a mark against him, turning it around super fast is really the main thing. This is not a Miami Dolphins situation where it's completely rebuilding an entire franchise. This is come in, get the absolute best out of this defense. Lamar Jackson's going to be Lamar Jackson, go win playoff games. That's what this is really about. And I think if that's what your aim is, that Brian Flores should be very, very high on the list.
There you go. Right from the man himself. At Matthew Coller is where you can be found on X. I'd also encourage everybody if you're looking for Vikings coverage, to go check out what you do at Purple Insider. You also got a Substack link that's right there. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this link into the live chat right now if folks want to follow along. And anything you'd like to plug on your way out, my brother?
No, that's great. Yeah. And, we're here. You guys are, who's going to be Lamar Jackson? Well, wait. You're not trading Lamar Jackson to the Vikings, are you? I don't think so.
My God. Would they welcome that?
Would they welcome that? Have you seen this team's quarterback history? Yeah, no, that's a real discussion here of like, is there any chance that Burrow or Lamar Jackson could be traded, because the Vikings would be at the top of the list for teams. So,
oh, wow. Okay. Shoot. I think the speculation would have ramped up a lot more in Baltimore had Harbaugh stayed.
Yeah.
Even though there's no true credible reporting out there that there was a rift between the two. I mean, certainly maybe it had run its course. It's sort of a he said, she said going on right now in the last 48 hours since this all came to fruition. Look, this will be the biggest failure in their 30 years of franchise history if they don't make sure that he spends the majority of his prime of his career in Baltimore. So I will say no, that there's no legitimacy behind those rumors. Then again, we've seen crazier things happen. And if a desperate team lines up a friggin' bank, then you just never know if you're Steve Bisciotti with that kind of carrot dangling in front of you. But I'll say no.
I don't think so either. The only thing is, though, that that cap hit looks pretty high for next year. So he's going to need an extension pretty soon. I'm just saying.
That's what the final answer of what I just gave you should have been, pending an extension. Because that has to get done. 75, to your point, is not ample team building strategy at all.
No.
So,
all right. Well, when they trade for Lamar, I'll have you on my show.
You name it, right? That's going to set the live chat off on your way out here, brother. You can be found on X at Matthew Coller. I appreciate you doing this in a pinch, and have a wonderful start to your new year.
Yep. Thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. Great stuff, man. Guys, I would love for you to go shoot him a quick little thank you and a tweet or a follow. Great stuff there from Matthew Coller, Purple Insider host, Vikings reporter and personality. We had him on earlier in the year when the Ravens played in Minnesota. But apparently it's not as see, that's a good perspective, what life is like outside of having a franchise quarterback, and who knows, J.J. McCarthy may end up being that guy. He was banged up this year. Struggled when he was out there, as we saw when the Ravens faced him. But yeah, like life isn't always as easy outside of fandom and organizations and teams that don't have their franchise quarterbacks locked up. So obviously the Ravens got to get an extension done. I think they will. Appreciate Matthew Coller for his time today. Some super chats have come in. Dark Thunder 35 says Anthony Weaver could be our D'Amico Ryans. Captain writes, no debate, Zach Orr was a bad hire. Kush Renata says, any hope for Steve Spagnuolo as head coach? So one of the candidates that the Ravens submitted a request for, as we discussed earlier on the stream, is Matt Nagy, offensive play caller under Andy Reid in Kansas City. I have not seen any buzz about Steve Spags from a Baltimore perspective. But I'll keep reiterating just how wide of a net they cast 3 years ago. 21 different interviews, 14 candidates. They're already 7 in, reportedly. Would not surprise me to see a number of folks make their way in over the next few days. And remember, they're as far out right now. They just completed their first interview with Vance Joseph, who we discussed earlier on, Denver defensive play caller. Zach was great on him. And as far out as Monday, they have something scheduled with Anthony Weaver. So this has the potential to be a very gradual, drawn-out process, just as it was 3 years ago. Hayes says a two-time MVP QB maker, Matt Nagy. Yes, just kidding. Block BWI on Sunday. I think it's going to be a virtual interview. Maybe they'll have him in person since Kansas City's out of it. Pop Punk Cowboy is celebrating 8 months of channel membership and says, Bobby, I wanted to tell you I respect the grind you've been on for the past 48. Keep working, brother. The flowers are on the horizon. Let's get Vance for head coach. Appreciate you, Pop Punk Cowboy. Thanks for the love. And as we've discussed, the Ravens did just complete their first interview with Vance Joseph of the Denver Broncos, who does have previous head coach experience. David Lindsay says Matt Nagy is Harbaugh 2.0. Good regular season, upside down in the playoffs. No thanks. Clint Kubiak for the win. We talked about him earlier on in the program. West Hall says, someone I want to see at least interviewed, but I haven't heard anything about. Anthony how do you pronounce that? Campanile from Jacksonville. Young guy, and defense there went from bottom 5 to top 5 in almost every category. They improve everywhere he goes. Let's do a quick little search on him. What is it, Campanile? Defensive coordinator under first-year head coach Liam Cohen, and wow, did they turn that thing around quickly in Duval. Prior to that, he was in Green Bay as the linebackers coach and run game coordinator. Linebackers coach for Miami prior to that. Spent a year in Michigan in 2019 as a linebackers coach. Got a lot of collegiate experience. He was a safety himself at Rutgers from 2001 to 2004. He's 43. He'll turn 44 in August. To be quite honest with you, Wes, I don't know much about him. Easier said than done trying to follow all these candidates. But if there comes to be some concrete reporting and the Ravens have interest, you can bet that I'll have my homework done and we'll be ready to go. G. Judy says, I like Anthony Weaver. He is charismatic and used to play for us. He would bring defensive intelligence and intensity. Combine him with someone like Mike McDaniel at offensive coordinator, and we might even be able to keep and develop Zach Orr. Interesting. Very interesting. Thanks, G. Judy. And Wes says it's Campanelli. Thank you, Campanelli. Thanks for the pronunciation guide there in real time. Jacksonville Jaguars defensive coordinator. They are going to play meaningful football this month. Let's get to a quick read here from ZipRecruiter. If you haven't already figured it out, today's going to be a long show. Jesus. Thanks to ZipRecruiter for sponsoring our show, both here inside the vault and on the Bobby Baltimore side of things. Guys, if you're hiring for your company, it's a busy time of year. You've got new 2026 goals, and that means finding the right people to accomplish them. You also have new hiring challenges for 2026, like filling specialized roles or identifying qualified candidates from a huge pool of applicants. Lucky for you, as you see on the screen, for those of you watching on YouTube or Twitter, there's a place that you can go to help you conquer these challenges, and that's ZipRecruiter. Achieve your hiring goals with them. You can try it for free at ziprecruiter.com/audio. Job Seekers tab is where you can learn more about a bunch of different options like searching jobs, searching salaries, job seeker reviews. Go download the app, create a free account, small and medium business options, bunch of different chances here, like posting a job, searching resumes, a tutorial for how it all works. Or what about enterprise businesses? You name it, ZipRecruiter has it. Let them help you find the best people for all your roles. 4 out of 5 who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day, and you can see for yourself and try it for free today at ziprecruiter.com/audio. Thanks to them for the continued support of our program. And again, go to the show notes to learn more. It's ziprecruiter.com/audio. Jay writes, why not Rex Ryan would fix the defense immediately? The only thought that comes to mind about Rex is not his defensive prowess. There's no question that will and always be there. Rex has been out of the league for a long time. Does he still, not has the game passed him by, but has his TV career perhaps derailed future chances at becoming involved with an organization again? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Rex is in his 60s, I believe. I think he's right around John Harbaugh's age, 63. I think John is 62. And Rex was last in the league. I know he's gotten interviews over the years, but he was last in the league, guys, a decade ago with Buffalo, where he was the head coach from 15 to 16. It's a long time. A long time. I would never bet against Rex Ryan, but those are two things that come to mind. Well, I think we've been through all candidates. An hour and 43 minutes into this. We've been through all candidates, but guess what? I've got more content for you. Captain Hard writes, wanted a young-minded coach with experience like Clint or Mike McDonald, someone who can relate to the new players coming in the league. And that comes to mind too, right? Relatability does come to mind. It does. Thanks for the super chat. To wrap up potential candidacy, Jim Harbaugh talked about defensive coordinator under him in Los Angeles for the Chargers, Jesse Minter, who's certainly a hot name and who certainly has plenty of familiarity with the Ravens, having served under John Harbaugh. Jim on Jesse.
Just really everything. All the things. Tremendous knowledge of the game. Great team. Teammate. I mean, I can just, already, just works so well with, the general manager, head coach relationship is going to be tremendous with him. That's really important. Just his ability to motivate, just all aspects, teacher, and it's always about the team. There's no ego there. Self-promoting. I think that's really important in the team environment. But check every box, everything. You got a box to check? Check it. Check it with Jesse. And I know I've said that many times, and he's had several have reached out, interview requests. So no surprise.
And perhaps the Ravens will be waiting till next week to talk to Jesse, knowing that it's Super Wildcard Weekend and they have a big matchup with the New England Patriots and Mike Vrabel. So maybe this is just another example of knowing that Anthony Weaver's scheduled for Monday, knowing that they just completed their first interview today with Vance Joseph, knowing that there's at least 6 or 7 other candidates. This is going to be a gradual, drawn-out process that is thoroughly conducted by Steve Bisciotti and his search team. Eric DaCosta, team president Sashi Brown. You can bet that Ozzie Newsome will have a say in this. And if you're just tuning in, Steve Bisciotti, for the first time since 2018 in a Owings Mills press conference setting, will address reporters, will hold a press conference on Tuesday. That's Tuesday the 13th, coming up next week alongside Eric DeCosta. So that is that. More from Jim Harbaugh, who for the first time addressed his brother's firing yesterday. Jim on John.
He's the best coach I know, best coach I've ever seen. And you may say, okay, well, I'm his brother, so I might be biased, but then you have somebody like Tony Dungy. Wouldn't we all like that? You know, wouldn't we all like somebody like Tony Dungy, especially Tony Dungy himself, to say that? It's great, seeing that kind of outpouring and of support, and also just so cool to see all my brother's accomplishments, and be recognized for that. And as I told him, whatever team he goes to is going to be formidable, and I just hope it's in the NFC.
So I'm assuming you've talked to him.
Yeah, I talk to my brother all the time.
Yeah. Just where was his sort of head at during this conversation?
Exactly what kind of the way he said it yesterday, which was always a lot of gratitude and first class all the way. And but could tell. He'll be attacking with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind the next opportunity, and there'll be a team. That'll be like a gift. Have the best coach, the best coaches ever, best coach I know.
No chance he joins you over here.
He'll be a head coach. Yeah, next year we'll be playing against him in some form or fashion, and just as I said, hope that's in the NFC.
Be surprised that the guy let go?
Yeah. Yeah.
Some brotherly love there from Jim on John. Of course, the Harbaugh Bowl, we just saw it most recently last year, and you heard what he had to say there. John Harbaugh is the best coach I know, the best coach I've ever seen. Whatever team he goes to is going to be formidable. I just hope it's in the NFC. He'll be attacking with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind the next opportunity, and of course went on to say that he was indeed surprised by the decision, as was perhaps Mike Tomlin, who addressed John Harbaugh's dismissal for the first time publicly on the Rich Eisen show yesterday.
First, I just have so much respect for Harbs. Our stories will forever be, interwoven. This rivalry that we've been fortunate and honored enough to be a part of. I just got so much respect for him and how he's gone about his business. And we've certainly had some legendary battles over the years. In terms of him being let go, unfortunately, I just think it's a component of today's sport culture. And so, there have been many examples of that. And so it's unfortunate, but I'm sure that he is going to move on. And if he chooses to coach again, I'm sure he will. And I'm sure he'll be very successful at doing so. But more than anything, I just think it's, a larger example of today's sport culture in terms of, not a lot of patience in the entertainment component of what it is that we do. There's just not a lot of longevity. I'm sure we all would like to be Don Shula and Tom Landry, but I think those days are gone.
I love Mike Tomlin. I got a lot of respect for him. The patience and continuity and longevity, you name it. John Harbaugh was at the helm for 18 years, man. 18 years. So anyway, look, you get the point. Shelf life in today's professional sport world is, shelf life is a thing. There isn't a lot of it. And Mike and John have been the outliers. And who knows? If Tomlin loses a playoff game coming up on Monday night against the Texans, he might be next. Bottom line is, it's a rivalry that's built around respect. Two of the best to have ever done it. Two future Hall of Famers. They met for their 40th time on Sunday night. It was an instant classic that the Ravens came out on the wrong side of. And there's been a lot of longevity between the two of them, being that they were the first and second longest tenured head coaches going into that matchup at 19 and 18 years, respectively. To put a bow on what John Harbaugh has been up to of late, Gary Myers, New York Sports, says that no interviews are expected to be conducted this weekend with John Harbaugh. He's taking his daughter, Allison, back to law school following holiday break. Allison is at UCF, right around the corner from me here in St. Pete. I thought he might be on the sidelines in New England on Sunday, Gary wrote, supporting his brother Jim and the Chargers in their wild card game against the Patriots, but he's not attending. Next week should be very busy in the Harbaugh Derby. He says, I've also heard he is not interested in looking into his TV options. He's told friends he's still very passionate about coaching and could see himself doing it for another 8 to 10 years. He's 63. Doesn't want or need a break. He's 63 years old and fired up for his next job. If that is not John Harbaugh, I don't know what is. Good for him. Go enjoy your family time. Go bring Allison back to school. 1MA, nobody's asking you to stick around here in terms of not wanting Harbaugh coverage. It's a part of the story. We're not even 72 hours into it. And again, I want to be very clear. No one is asking you, MA, or forcing you at your own will to stay here inside the vault and watch our coverage. Let me say that one more time for you, 1MA. Nobody is forcing you against your own will to stay here inside the vault. You could easily leave and come back tomorrow when we continue the head coach talk, or come up tonight. Remember, I'm on limited sleep, so I got time. You can come back later this afternoon when I continue my coverage on the Bobby Baltimore channel about all things next head coach shirts. Nobody's forcing you, one more time. Nobody's forcing you to stay here and bitch in the live chat at your own will. I'll finish there. As far as John Harbaugh is concerned, Adam Schefter refuted Ian Rappaport's commentary from earlier this week on the idea that that the John Harbaugh locker room was lost. And Schefter came in pretty hard there on Rappaport. Listen to this.
I don't think that information right there could be any less true. The players were coming to his office crying, hugging him, sending him goodbyes, calling him one by one. If they felt that way, why are Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers and Isaiah Likely and all these players coming in, crying, hugging him, giving him these long, warm goodbyes? I'm not buying that.
Okay, so let's go ahead and slide that to the side as something that is not happening. A.Q. Shipley, who played for the Ravens, said that Harbaugh is his favorite coach that he's ever had. So I think there's a lot.
That would be consistent. That would be consistent with the type of things that I've heard.
Okay. Schefter, I've never seen a coach take their players back more than John Harbaugh, especially in the media too. All the stuff that Lele took early in the season, he stood at the podium, he stared every one of them in the face and had his back. And I think every player respects him because of that.
Okay, so how did we get to this point then? What do you think was the reasoning? Was it just everything that we had talked about?
I just think here's the deal. Sometimes nobody does anything wrong. You go on for 18 years, and it's time for everybody to go a different direction. It's okay. Nobody has to do something wrong. There doesn't have to be some salacious reason. Doesn't have to be some fight or something like that. Sometimes it could just be they fell short the last few years, whether it was for Zay Flowers dropping the ball, fumbling the ball at the goal line, or Mark Andrews not catching the 2-point conversion, or Tyler Loop missing the field goal, and you don't get the job done. And you know what? It's time to just go make a change. Like when I covered the Denver Broncos back in the day, Dan Reeves was a great coach. And after a while, Pat Bowlen just felt like, you know what? It's time for me to take back my franchise. He wanted to go a different direction. He hired Mike Shanahan. They won Super Bowls. That's what happened. In Denver, John Fox took them to the number 1 seed 3 times. He did a great job. It wasn't like he did something wrong. They shook it up. They moved on from him. They hired Gary Kubiak. They won a Super Bowl. It doesn't always work out with a happy ending, but sometimes these owners just feel like time to make a change. We see it in the business world. There are companies that make changes of CEOs after 10, 12, 15, 18 years. 18 years is what John Harbaugh did. He won more road playoff games than any coach in history. He's the belle of the ball right now. These teams are going to trip over themselves to hire him. He can pick the spot he wants right now.
Okay.
It's just time to make a change sometimes.
Again, here, there's some he said, she said commentary going on here. Rapport noted on NFL Network earlier this week that his understanding is that John Harbaugh lost pieces, meaning members of the locker room. It was this right here.
The reasons, it is not just they didn't go far enough in the playoffs. My understanding after talking to several sources involved is that simply Harbaugh lost the locker room. But at the end, players just simply had doubts about whether or not they wanted to play for him as their head coach. The opinions of players, Judy, was valued here. It was listened to. It went to all levels, and it's not just Lamar Jackson. Now, it sounded like to me, with Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson not being on the same page, and it continued throughout the locker room, maybe not 100%, but more than enough for the Baltimore Ravens to say among the reasons to move on, this was a big one. John Harbaugh, of course, out now as Ravens coach.
So again, that right there from Rapport is what Schefter refutes and refutes with passion. You heard it. Quote, I don't think that information right there could be any less true. The players were coming to his office crying, hugging him, sending him goodbyes, calling him one by one. If they felt that way, why are Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers and Isaiah Likely and all these players coming and crying, hugging him, giving him these long, warm goodbyes? I'm not buying that. I have a hard time with this because there's other reports out there that John didn't have a chance to tell his staff, that Eric DeCosta and Sashi Brown had to tell the staff. So did he have a chance to tell his players? Like somewhat, and this is what happens when there's an ending in a non-mutual way. This was not a mutual parting of ways, right? So this is what's difficult about trying to fully understand, and somebody needs to be, I can't do it all, guys, unfortunately, solo here, but who needs to be banned? Help me out. I just caught it out of the corner of my eye here. I got rid of Twat Swat because he was saying nonsense, but I just can't, unfortunately, can't do both here. Princess Kate. All right. I got a note on it. Long story short is when a departure and an exit consists of how it has, right, and the way that it went down, this is pretty par for the course. That as time goes on and as agents share their perspective, players in some cases share their perspectives, you name it. Everybody has a different viewpoint in terms of how it went down. Ultimately, what's clear, and the clarity that is abundantly clear, is that this was a decision made by Steve Bisciotti. And John Harbaugh wanted to run it back, and ultimately he did not get his wish. And now the Ravens search is very much in play, which is why I just gave you 120 minutes of content. 7 candidates reportedly that the Ravens are interested in. 1 interview has been done, has been conducted, and is completed with Vance Joseph, the defensive coordinator for the Denver Broncos. Will not be the last. Clinton writes, okay, hear me out. Kubiak as head coach. McDaniel as offensive coordinator. Jim Schwartz as defensive coordinator. Oh, I'm listening. I'm listening to you. Absolutely, Clinton. A lot to like about that trio. Particularly given Jim Schwartz' Baltimore roots. A Mount St. Joe guy, for those of you that are local to the area. K. Robin says, why y'all keep suggesting Rex? He's such a hard critic of Lamar. I don't think there would be good chemistry. We want to win now. And Liv, who's celebrating 8 months of channel membership, says, hey, Bobby, might want to ban at Princess Kate. Thanks for the tidbit there, Liv. Thank you for your channel membership. I've gotten a couple notes on that. I just have to wait until the show's actually over because there's too many comments in here, to be quite honest with you. Did have a couple quick hits for you. Certainly not a list that you want to see Ravens names on, but unfortunately, that's the case for Nate Wiggins and Marlon Humphrey, who were the 2 defensive backs who allowed the most yards in coverage all season long. Marlon allowed 831. Nate Wiggins allowed 810. And of course, there should be always a conversation that's added into this, knowing that the pass rush, this is in a lot of ways a pass rush or lack thereof statistic, but tough. Tough scene for a Ravens secondary that's too proud to be on a list like this. Marlon obviously struggled this year. He was banged up. Perhaps they have a decision to make on his future. I'm not too worried about Nate. It was a tough couple weeks for him. Certainly that Green Bay game is one that he'll want to forget to finish up his year. But I think that Nate has still a very promising, bright future. And a lot of that was technique, like Zach and John spoke about. Teddy Buchanan on the other side of surgery. Good for him, saying it was a success. Remember, last month, about a month ago now, at the time he was the second leading tackler as a rookie, tore his ACL. So, gosh, what was he doing the last few weeks? This was just a day or two ago that this was posted. Dang. I don't know what the decision is there from a medical perspective, but hopefully it was the right one to delay like that. But best wishes to Teddy. Really was impressed with what he did his rookie season. And I think he's got a bright future ahead. So best wishes. Guys, if you haven't already done so, you can join the Bobby Baltimore Discord server. It's also really the Vault Discord server in a lot of ways as well, being that it's just an extension of the live chat. It's free to join, and I just dropped, free Discord access is entering the live chat right now. There's over 1,100 members and counting. It's a great group. And Kadri, just with a little bit of context there in the live chat, most likely overt swelling and perhaps another ligament or meniscus that was not reported because the surgery was delayed. Great context there from the movement man himself. Thanks to Q for popping on the show yesterday for his perspective. And again, if you guys haven't already done so, I would love for you to join the Discord group. When you do, you get a shout out, and we're up to 1,137 members. Pop Punk Cowboy became number 1137. Welcome to a Woozy as well. Is that Cheeto? Is that Cheeto? Awuzie? Denarius? Way? Throwing Knife? Welcome to the Discord, guys. It's a great group. We talk sports all day long. Ravens football, Orioles baseball, Washington Capitals hockey. You name it. A lot of chatter in here all day long, 24/7. It's a great group of like-minded Baltimore sports fans and just sports fans in general. Guys, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell on your way out. Like the video. That would go a long way for us. You can connect with me on Twitter this offseason to continue following what is a massive deal, and that is the Ravens ongoing search. My handle's up on the screen right there. It's at Bobby Baltimore. The O in Baltimore is a 0, just to be clear. And the same thing can be said on Instagram. All the direct links can be found in the show notes. And before you get on out of here, make sure that you enter yourself into the giveaway, because there's $100 in a Fanatics gift card that's out there for the taking this month, courtesy of Primary Residential Mortgage, one of our sponsors. Thanks to ZipRecruiter as well. Thanks to all of you for spending part of your Thursday with me. 2+ hours. It was a jam-packed show. Thanks to Matthew Coller. I appreciate him for his Vikings and Brian Flores analysis. I thought that was fantastic. And I will say this. I have one thought, because it really does bother me when I see this type of commentary, and maybe it's just trolling and sarcasm in the live chat. But, you know, anyone that thinks that I'm not a fan of Brian Flores because of his skin color or because of his background or because of what's taken place with the Miami Dolphins and some of the allegations that are out there and some of the critiques, come on, just go home. Like, you just don't know me. And please, I don't want to have to answer to that nonsense, but I feel like I have to when it starts to hit the live chat, because that's not me. And maybe I shouldn't be giving oxygen to it, but I hope you guys know me better than that. And when I talk about every candidate, every player, you name it, regardless of ethnicity, skin color, you name it, none of that matters. We're talking about it from an objective lens, in this case, as who makes the best next head coach for the Ravens franchise. And that's simply what I attempted to do by bringing in Matthew Coller, who I thought was fantastic. That's the last time I'm going to address that nonsense. And thanks to Zach Bai for his Denver perspective as well. Vance Joseph, the first of many head coach interviews that have now been completed by Steve Bisciotti and his hiring team. All right. Appreciate you guys as always. Thanks to Primary Residential Mortgage. Thank you to Zach By and Matthew Coller for dropping by as my guests. Thanks to ZipRecruiter, and thanks to all of you guys. I'll be live later on this afternoon on the Bobby Baltimore side of things. As always, we'll continue to follow this wall to wall. It's been a heck of a week, heck of a start to the offseason. A lot of exciting things coming up. I look forward to bringing Jimmy Smith on at some point as well. Thanks, guys. Enjoy it. And thank you, Vaultrons, for spending some time with us here inside the vault.